Okay, I think we are online now.
Yes.
Yeah. Could,
Okay.
could, could you see in the screen?
Yes,
Um,
I can see
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
the live in the screen. Okay. We are going to start now or wait 5 minutes or
yeah, it's only we can wait like 15 seconds.
okay. Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome again. I'm very happy to be here again. Today I'm with Henry and Andre. They are organizer too of Medellin CSS. So I'm so happy to present this meetup for today. As you can see, this version is very different than others because we decide to do 100% in English, but we have a couple of reasons to do in this way. They are good reasons, I think, but this is not my part of the presentation. Um, that's it.
Okay. Okay, thank you again and welcome back, Luisa. And yes,
Thank
welcome of
you.
everybody who is connected right now. Thank you for being here again. As Luisa said, we are very happy and excited. This is our first meetup on English. There is many challenges on here, so I want to ask you in advance for your understanding because for sure we are going to make many English mistakes because since we are not native speakers. But also the reason for this is because we are happy to bring you international talks and also try to make you feel comfortable with these English events. So, and now let's see our next slide.
Okay, let's start. Today we are going to talk about LV5, and also we are going to talk about reasons to stop using a CSS preprocessor. And that's it. Andre.
Yes, you're right. Okay, so now let me talk about our speakers. Today we are going to have Afonso, he's from Brazil, and Guillermo, that he's part of our team. And Afonso is going to talk about LV5 and Guillermo about CSS preprocessors. And now it's time for the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Andre and Luisa, for the introduction. Our agenda today is how we introduce the last meetup. We have our recommended sections of the month. After that, we are going to talk about Welcome CSS Lv5 by Alfonso, Q&A for this talk. After that, talk number 2, don't use a CSS preprocessor anymore, Q&A for this talk. And our second recommendation of the day. And after that, our recommended article. And we are so excited and happy to announce this bit team. And finally, if you want to be a speaker, we have a form that you can fill and set up for your talk. Andre?
Right. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Okay, our first recommendation of the day is Stephanie Aguilar. You can find her in the majority of her social media like GitHub, Twitter, Medium, Instagram as Stefco. She's a web developer from Medellin. She's one of the co-organizers of CSS Conf Colombia, a teacher at Plaxi, She usually creates a lot of amazing content about CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, and small exams about these technologies that are really useful if you want to improve, or if you don't know news tabs or properties in CSS are really awesome. And she has written a lot of articles that you can see in her Medium account. And in addition, she is a nice girl and very kind. So don't hesitate in following her.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. And she was part of me in CSS as well.
Yeah, yeah, you are right. Okay, let's begin with our first song of the day. Uh, the name of this song is Welcome to CSS Lv5 by Afonso Pacifer. He is a principal JavaScript developer, tech leader, and Valle Sistemas, and host in frontend VR community, and former CSS evangelist. He has a lot of amazing articles about CSS, JavaScript, and a lot of open source projects that you can see in his GitHub profile and in his personal page. And also, I want to say that he's the reason why we are doing this meeting in English. So thank you for that, Alfonso.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I'm very nervous. Yeah, yeah. But this is cool. I can start.
Yeah, yeah.
And good morning, everybody. And let's start. First, some short warnings. The first is this is my first talk in English. Okay, okay. And my English is terrible, but I promise to try to speak it slowly for improve the speaker. And tu puedes preguntar en español. My my language is Portuguese, and Spanish and Portuguese is easy to understand. And don't worry with the English, and habla como puder. Okay. Today, my talk is about the CSS Level 5, or welcome to the CSS Level 5. Bienvenida, CSS Level 5. My name is Afonso Pacifer. I'm a principal JavaScript developer and tech lead at Valle Web. I'm a host at the frontend BR community, the biggest frontend community, or the biggest online frontend community in my country, Brazil. And I am a brand new co-organizer at the Meetup CSS in Brazil, in São Paulo, Brazil. I live in São Paulo, in Brazil. Okay. Brazil. Let's talk a little bit about Brazil. Brazil is a big country. Okay, it's a continent, have a continental size, but the best picture to explain how no to explain the Brazil, the best picture to explain the Brazil is here, this GIF. Yeah. In Brazil, we have children and dogs walking the street and dancing and do a lot of cool things. Yeah, this is Brazil. Also, we have a lot of front-end conference and meetups around the country. This picture is from the Frontend Sampa, the big front-end conference in the Brazil. A cool thing about Brazil are we drink a lot of water during the cold. And other cool thing is we have the biggest JavaScript conference in the universe, the Brazil JS conference. And it's awesome. And again, we drink a lot of water in our events. Yeah, this is a computer. This guy is coding now. Brazil is a cool place. Okay, CSS level 5. Before I talk about level 5, you can probably stay thinking things like, what's happened to the CSS4? Don't worry, you don't miss anything. And questions like what's happened to CSS4, or questions like what the fuck CSS5 are normals. But I solved this problem and I explained these features. Let me show how the W3C works. Então, relax, okay? For understand the level 4 or 5 or 6 or other levels, we can back to the base. In the base of the CSS was the W3C. Okay, the process is basically W3C write the specifications, like specification for HTML, for CSS, for JavaScript APIs, and the browsers implementing these features. Simple. Okay. And what happened when CSS5? First, we needed to understand a short but complex concept. The CSS5 don't exist. Yeah. And the CSS4, for the same reasons, don't exist too. Okay. At this point, my presentation not make sense. But for I explain these points, we needed to understand the past to explain better the future called CSS5. Anyway, for this, I will present now a short history about the CSS, a short timeline about the history of CSS. First, in 94, I can't pronounce this name, but I will try. Hakon Yoon Lee starts the first CSS draft. In the same year, Bert Bos, the co-author of the CSS, became interested and decided to help in the project. And in this same year, the CSS, the first presentation about the CSS occurs in Chicago, in the WWW conference. In 95, in the same conference, the W3C become interested in this CSS guy. Oh, this is a cool thing. The first email list about CSS was created in the 95. In the 96, W3C released the CSS 1.0 specification. It's a great important year. And the Internet Explorer as the first browser to support CSS, followed by Netscape 4 and Opera 3.5. Okay, in 97, the first working group in W3C for working in JavaScript specification was officially created. In 98, this is a most important year, W3C released the CSS 2.0 specification. And this is in 98. And only in the same year, Eric Myers released the developer suite for Opera, and this project is most useful to all browsers implementing the CSS. It's this is a most important project, this developer suite by Eric Meyer in 98. Okay, now jump to, we stay in 98, jump to 2011, a lot of years, and W3C released the CSS 2.1. In 2014, the W3C released the HTML5 bundle, and finally the CSS3 leaves the draft status for becoming a recommendation. Okay, here We have a timeline, but between the 98 and 2011, we have a big gap. In 98, the CSS 2.0 was released. In 2011, the CSS 2.1 was released. And what happened inside these years? Or why the W3C spent all this time writing the specification? The response is the CSS 2.1 is big. This GIF show only the summary of the specification, not the complete document. This is only the summary of the document. It's crazy. It's a big document, and it's hard to do change and maintain this document. It's a big document. The W3C spent years for writing this. And the solution, I promise it, all this is make sense. And the solution for this problem is the CSS tree, the most powerful human invention of the history for me. And for understand the importance of the CSS tree, we can think in CSS tree beyond the features. Beyond CSS tree is much more than animation, flexbox borders, selectors, grid layout, custom properties. We think in CSS tree beyond this. For understand the CSS 2.1 as a big document. Thinking the work, the W3C needed to improve this document is hard and no fun. On the other side, CSS3 was born differently. In CSS3, all features are called modules, and their modules have your own versions. These versions are called levels, and in the CSS 2. Before the CSS3, the CSS are a big specification, like a monolithic project. Before the CSS3, all specification is broken in small pieces, and all pieces was your levels, and this piece is called modules. And finally, the CSS can grow your features independently of the global specification. The CSS is broken in small CSSers. And so this reason is the global CSS for R5 don't make sense. And never CSS4 and CSS or CSS4 or CSS5 never will exist. This global version never will exist because the modules inside the CSS3 working independently, and these modules can have level 4, 5, 6. Because this presentation is called the Welcome to CSS Level 5, not Welcome to CSS 5, only 5. Okay, what happened inside a level? A level was different states of evolution. A life cycle of the life cycle of a module was different states. The first state is called working draft. This is internal, but we go find this like a first public working draft, the first state of a specification, a module. The second state is the candidate to recommendation. In this state, the specification is more robust and complete. At this point, probably the browser really implemented the feature. The third step is the proposal recommendation. This step is more like a formal W3C proposal. And the last, the final step is the recommendation. When specification becomes a recommendation, the W3C literally recommends the feature for the world. Is the last step for a module. A cool thing about levels is a level can have a module can have, for this example, transformers module level 1 are in the candidate recommendation, but you can have the same module in other level and in other step with this life cycle. Is fun, and these two specifications growth side by side. This is a interesting thing. Okay, now I have any tips and tricks about specifications, and here we go. My first tip is follow the editors. And in this example, you can see the editors here, and in this case, in this documentation, the editors are Chris Lilly from W3C, Una Kravitz from Google, Lia Vero representing the community, like an W3C invited expert, and Adam Adriel from Google. Another tip is help the editors. Here as a cool thing. One moment. Here. Before the CSS3, all W3C specifications are organized in Mercurial system. But before the CSS3, all W3C specifications are moved from Mercurial to GitHub. And you can access the W3C GitHub and see all comments, all specifications, all issues. And a cool thing is you can help the documentation process. You can contribute into this open source project, because the W3C specifications are open source projects in the GitHub. It's a cool. And my final tips about how you can study about specifications is study the specs. For me, the best way to learn CSS or web standards is to learn the original documentations. In this case, the W3C specs. If you read, for example, the custom property specification, you get all knowledge. English is hard about this topic and this is insane. The growth is insane. For example, finally, I will start talking about CSS colors module level 5, not CSS level 5. I was talking about the module called colors in level 5. This documentation currently are in the first in working draft. This is a brand new specification, but I will try to explain them. Okay, CSS colors level 5 is made for you can create dynamically adjustments in your colors without you using a preprocessor. Guillermo will talk more about this in the next talk. But for example, I will explain a first function from the CSS colors level 5. The first function is called color mix. Color mix is simple. You take two colors and mix them. Simple. You take two colors and result a mix of these colors. In this example, you can use the function called mix color. The function accepts two arguments, two colors. In this example, I will use the red and green, and this function results in the mix of these colors. It's simple, it's easy. You can pass two colors and the function mixing them. Okay, it's a brand new thing, it's a cool thing, and how you, it's the browser support for this feature. About the browser support, I recorded a short video for explain how the support working in these brand new specifications. I will start a video now. If you can't hear the sound, please tell me. I will play. All can hear? Okay, this is the better way I find to explain this browser support for these features. Yeah, and can I use it? You can't find the specification. It's fun. And a question appears: why this specification? The color mix is simple. Why the browsers don't implement them? Let's understand. For understanding how the browsers, why the browsers don't implement, we need to understand how this function work under the hoods, working behind. For this example, we have a red color. Okay, red color. The red color can explain it. This is the hexadecimal for the red color. You can express the color with this code. Or you can use the RGB for represent the red color. But for the new color specification work, you can refer the colors using other function, other value. You need to use a LCA. The LCA this LCA code represents the red color, and this is lightness, chroma, and hue, and these values represent the red, and you can create any color using the LCA new function. Lia Verot writing an article about the LCA. This article is brand new, is from this year. And in the article, she explained how you can use this, how the better situations, she explained better the LCA colors. And important is the LCA, the LCA don't have any support for any browser. Okay. Now for understanding how the color mix working, we can pass a third parameter. In this example, we have a mixed color, and we pass the first parameter with a red color and the second a yellow color. The third parameter is a percent, and this percent refer the first parameter. Yeah, it's confusing. This specification still in working draft. And the rest of the percent refers to the second parameter. In the example is in this way. Okay. And now how the mixed color work under the hoods. We have two colors, red and yellow, with your percents. Okay. And for explain how this work, I will create three variables for this example. The first variable is C1L for lightning, for the first color lightning, C1C for the first color contrast. Let me see. I'm very nervous. Chroma. Okay, lightning is chroma and hue. Okay. The first variable for called C1L for lightness, the second C1C for chroma, and the third C18 for the hue. These variables for the red color, okay? And for the yellow color, we have the same, the three variables. The first C2L for yellow lightning, the second C2C for yellow chroma, and the third C28 for the yellow hue. Okay? Variables for representing the numbers from the LCA function. And the challenge here is plus these colors using the LCH. And we can do this separately. English is hard. You can mix these colors piece by piece. First, you can mix only the lightness. For this, we can get the percent of the C1L. You can get the percent of the lightning of the red color, the first color, and plus with the result of the percent of the lightness from the second color, the yellow. Okay, C1L percent plus C2L, the second color, percent. We call the result X for this example. Now you can mix the chroma, is the same. You can get the C1C, the chroma from the first color, percent, plus the chroma from the second color, percent. Okay? And just plus the percent of the pieces of the LCH from the two colors. We call the result Y. And you can mix here. It's the same process, C18 percent plus C28 percent from the second color. And we call this result Z. Now we have the result. The LC8 for the mix from the red and yellow colors are this. Is confusing. Okay, at this time you probably thinking about, whoa, CSS is hard. Yeah, CSS hard. And about this topic we have I have a tip. CSS is easy to learn, but it's very hard to become an expert. And this is true. Okay. The second function present in the CSS modules level 5 is called color contrast. This is my favorite function in the colors level 5 specification. This function selected the better contrast following the WCIG. This function gets color values, and using the WCIG, WCIG is the guideline for accessibilities on the web. A W3C documents with these guidelines, and this function uses the WCIG rules for select why colors has a better contrast. I will explain. In the example, we have a color contrast function. We can pass a first parameter. The first parameter is the background of the div or of any HTML element. In this example, we're creating a simple white background. In the second parameter is a list of colors, and these colors is gray, red, and yellow. Now we have one background, a white background, and three possibles, three colors. The color contrast at this point will be using the WCAG to define a contrast ratio for all possibilities, and automatically color contrast select the better contrast for this background. In this case, the contrast ratio from red is better than yellow and gray. And this process is amazing, and you can only pass, you need only pass the color contrast, the background, and the possible colors, and the CSS make the magic behind. For example, you can create a button element. You can define your color using the color contrast, and you can pass a lot of custom properties or CSS variables. And you, using this simple code snippet, you improve a lot your accessibility. This is a great way to improve your contrast. It's a great feature in CSS. And you can create in custom design systems more easily because you can create components more. You can create custom components using automatically custom components using the color contrast, and you can create easy dark mode. Imagine you have your project and you have a button, you click, you change the background from white to black. All components using the color contrast automatically will be adjusted with the background. This is insane, and this is a great feature for CSS. And the broad support for this feature, yeah, color contrast is the feature. And the CSS colors level 5 has and many other cool functions for control, adjustments, for lightness, for hue, for a lot of cool things using the new color specs. It's a great. And CSS colors level 5 is the feature. Is a brand new specification with many interesting features and functions. Is a great specification. And for you can use this now, today, if you can use these features today, you can use a polyfill. Yeah. Philip Walton writing this article about the dark side of polyfill CSS. Basically, today creating polyfills for CSS is a hard job, and it don't make sense. It have a lot of problems and is completely don't prepare to production. It's not production ready, and you can't create polyfills for CSS today. Creating polyfills for CSS today is a bad idea. This article explains better these reasons. But my new side project is creating a CSS color polyfill because I need to try these features today. I need to calculate all these things using only CSS. I will recreate these behaviors using the JavaScript, and I will create my polyfill for I can doing this today, using these features today. In the future, we can use the CSS Houdini for creating best CSS polyfills. CSS Houdini basically enable the developer to working inside all layers in the process of the browser painting render the CSS. Using the CSS Houdini, you can access the CSS on, like you can access the CSS, like you can access the DOM for change the HTML. You can access the CSS on for change and creating cool things in CSS. And is a feature. And finally, I have my final tips. And I decided to write and speak in English after I read this book. This book was written by my friend, Zeno Rocha, and in this week, he tells me news about this book. The Spanish release is coming, and this is awesome, and I really recommend this book for any developer. And finally, I have my final tip in Spanish. Empieza a hacer lo que no sabes y la evolución será solo una consecuencia. This is my mantra. I follow this in my tech career, and now I follow this to learn English. I don't speak in English. Now, speaking English is hard for me because my native language is Portuguese. And follow this is my secret for enhance and improve my tech and soft skills, and now my communication skills for meet new peoples and friends and around the world. And sorry for my bad, very bad English. And finally, it's me. And finally, gracias.
Thank you so much, Afonso. You did an amazing job. It's very funny because yesterday I was talking with Afonso in Twitter about how scared we were about this meeting, speaking in English. This is my first time too, and I have a confession to say. I can't sleep very well because I was thinking of the worst possible scenarios during this meeting, and yeah. Okay. while we wait for questions for you, remember, guys, if you have any questions for Alfonso, you can write in the chat in YouTube. While we wait for these questions, I have three questions for you. Number one, you mentioned that you understand Spanish. Are you learning, or is because Portuguese and Spanish are pretty similar?
Yeah, learn Spanish. For me, Spanish is very similar to Portuguese. It's more easily to learn. My first idea is learn English for this presentation, but uh, talking English is better for the community, for expose the power of the communication. It's a great thing, and I try to learn using books, generic books, and watching a lot of tech talks. I watching a lot of technical talks. For learn Spanish, I watched the last meetups, middle meetups, and I will watching and try to understand and this way.
Yeah, I think that English right now is one of the most important language in the world. As Guille say, a couple of weeks ago, this opened the door to the world, and expand your job opportunities in 3x. Yeah, and yeah, and the other question for you is, I read an article yours a couple of weeks ago about you made your own CSS preprocessor, your own JavaScript framework, and other amazing things during 365 days. And yeah, for me, it was a blown mind. Could you tell us more about this challenge or this project?
Okay. My friend, my friend Rafael Amorim challenged me for this challenger called Write Code Every Day. And basically, in this challenge, we working or creating open source projects uh, all days during 1 year. Is crazy, but it's awesome because you in this challenge you can learn about different things. I created a theme for my editor's code. For example, I created CLI tools using shell script, and I created my CSS preprocessor for learning JavaScript. And in this process, I learned JavaScript better, especially Node.js. But after I created my front-end framework using the virtual DOM for learning JavaScript in the client side, and a project, another project. It's a year, uh, awesome. It's an awesome year. This challenger is awesome. It's hard, but it's awesome.
Oh man, this is awesome. Congratulations for that. Kevin Mendieta have a question for you. Yeah. Do you think eventually all these distributed peaks will kill CSS preprocessors? And talking about CSS components, what improvements we have in this CSS Lv5?
I can't hear you.
Could you hear me now, Alfonso? Guys, could
Hello?
you hear me?
Hello? Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, could you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I repeat the questions. The question for you.
I hear. It's about the CSS, the native CSS kill the preprocessor, right?
Yeah. This is a question.
Ah, yeah. The CSS is also the better. I created the preprocessor for uh, proves that the only CSS is better because you can change the things in on the fly. Is awesome, but I can't talking more about this because the next talk is about this topic, and Guillermo will be explain this topic. It's a great one.
Okay, there are many congratulations for you. For example, Julian Ramirez saying
Gracias.
gracias. Luis Felipe, thanks for that.
Thanks.
Leticia, congratulations.
Thanks.
And Joan Leon asks if you want to learn more about CSS Houdini, follow CSS Houdini at Twitter and take a look to the link in bio. There are a lot of resources.
Awesome.
And Leticia again said, Alfonso, you rock only that. And Rafael said, absolutely amazing, my friend. Thanks again for sharing this with us. And Leticia asks, what material would you recommend for those who want to study CSS but don't know much?
Okay. This is a great question because the idea the CSS specification is is easy to learn. If you can try to learn the specification, you see uh, is English is hard. If you can uh, try to learn the specification, if you have questions or difficulties, you can send a message to the editors of the specification. And before this talk, I sent an email from Una Kravitz, talking about this talk I will be present, and she is absolutely amazing for helping me in this day. And you can try to learn the basics using the W3C, and I can hear you.
Uh, Guys, could you hear me?
Yeah, now yeah.
Okay.
Okay, learn it with the W3C specification. If you have any questions, send for the community on the Twitter or send directly from the editors of the specification. This is a great place for learning, and the specification is easy to learn if you try.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And thank you for your talk. You did an amazing job.
Gracias.
Congratulations.
Gracias.
Andre?
Yes, here I am. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you again, Afonso. It was a great talk. And see you next time. So now it's time for, let me check here. It's time for our first recommendation. So now I want that you to start following Sarah Dashner. Because she's an incredible developer and she's part of the Vue.js core team, and she likes to write about CSS animations. For example, she has some articles in CSS Tricks, and even that, in fact, she has some nice courses about animation, or for example, this one, design for developers, introduction to VS, anyway, and advanced CVG animation. Well, so it's a great um, person to follow. So that's our first recommendation. And about the article, we have this one. If you want to master about CSS media query, if you want to understand it in an advanced level, you should read this article. It's a complete, a full, very long, but very interesting article about this. And actually, they show some future specifications. For example, how to implement a dark mode in a web application using media query. So let me put you again. Okay, I haven't this one. Let me put again the article, the link that you can take. Even we are going to post it in Twitter. So don't worry if you don't catch the link. But yes, that's our two recommendations. And now it's time for our next talk. Let me introduce you our next speaker. And let me bring here first, because I want to say your face when I'm saying all the nice stuff about you. Hello, Guille. Okay, our speaker, Guillermo Rodas, he's a Google developer expert and in web technologies. He's also part of the team, of the organizer team of the CSS conference, and also part of the lovely tech community called Medellin CSS. And he's a good teacher. He has some Node.js courses and Platzi platform. And today he's going to talk about CSS preprocessors, what you can see there. So welcome back, Guillermo. We are glad to have you here. How are you?
I am great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you pretty well.
Okay.
So the the screen is yours. Can you start sharing, please?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll leave you.
Yeah. Thank
Good
you so
luck.
much. Okay, so yeah, so today we are going to talk about why don't use CSS preprocessors anymore. And yeah, it's like a like a tricky statement, right? Like, what are you talking about? Why don't use it? And what I want to explain is like give you a couple of point of view why you should like think again about use it, because I feel that sometimes we just use the tools because somebody else start to use it. We never ask ourselves like, why is this tool used from the beginning? What was the reason behind? Do we really need it? Do we really need the whole thing that is behind? And we normally get to get married with a tool, and we never think about that. So in my personal experience, I haven't used CSS preprocessor for, I will say, almost 6 years already. I mean, 6 years ago, I don't use anymore any preprocessor. So yeah, my name is Guillermo Rodas. As Andy say, a Google developer Google developer expert in web technologies. I also a conference organizer from the CSS Colombia. Of course, we have to move it to the 2021 because obvious reasons. And also an online teacher. And currently I'm doing some Twitch streaming coding online. You can search me using my handle, GLRODASZ. That's a hard word in English as well. And if you want to know more about me, of course, we have my website, guillermorodas.com. And let's start this. Let's start with the summary. So today we are, of course, talking about what is a preprocessor, because I kind of assume that everyone knows about it. Then we are going to compare the features, the preprocessor features, unless the most used them, and then with the current native solutions. And then we are ask ourselves if it's worth it. And finally, we are talking about something called post CSS that maybe you know, but maybe you're not sure, or maybe you're not aware you have been using so long. So let's talk about what is the preprocessor, what that means. So I'm pretty sure there are too many preprocessors there. For instance, the Afonso one that he created. But I will say the most common ones are these. I remember that the first time that I saw a preprocessor was a stylus. And a stylus was like this hipster guy, because, I am super cool. I don't use semicolons. I don't use brackets. I am just so ident space. It's super cool. And that feels like really nice, because you said, okay, if I don't use brackets and don't use semicolons and all stuff, I will write code, more code faster. But that's not true. That's a spoiler alert. That's not true. That's not how coding works. Yeah, if you write less lines, doesn't mean that you are doing a better job. In fact, it can be worse, because you can make the CSS less legible, right? And to be honest, most of the part of the time we are going to just maintain code, and it's super important that the code can be understood right away. So that's something that happens similar to SAS. SAS, when he starts, because SAS is the first preprocessor. He was released in the 2006. And they have like this variation. They have the variation that stylus have. Like you can use SAS with the extension I think it's CASS, that's the name. You can use SAS without semicolon, without brackets and all that stuff. And then of course we have Less. Less was very famous because Bootstrap, who remembers Twitter Bootstrap? I haven't used that one also recently. It's there. But I think it's super common and it's super used as well. But personally, I haven't used so many, CSS frameworks or UI frameworks for so long. I guess the popularity of Less was because Bootstrap, but then if I'm not wrong, was the version Bootstrap 3 when Bootstrap changed, instead of use Less, start to using SAS. And currently, I will say the SAS is the most popular solution. So all of three are preprocessors. They have similar, they solve similar problems. And we are talking about what are those problems that they solve. For me, these are like the more common ones. Like the first thing was variables. Long time ago, CSS doesn't have any variables. And, if you are familiar with coding with JavaScript and other programming language, the variables is like the cornerstone of coding, right? So that's super important. That's a really nice feature. So personally, one of the first reasons that I wanted to use a CSS preprocessor, it was because variables. And we are going talking later about that. What is the current status of that? And then nesting. Nesting is the ability to, put CSS inside CSS. Because when you need to do selectors, it's common that in CSS we need to do a lot of selectors. You used to go deep to few levels, because normally you avoid to use IDs. You normally use classes. And then for apply some kind of properties in CSS, you start to repeat a lot of code. And nesting is quite a solution for that. Then you have mixins and functions and models, and we are going to talk about detail later in the presentation. So just a refresh, stylus, this is how it looks. You will see in the left that we don't have any brackets, any semicolons, and then the variables in stylus. That's an easy way to recognize which preprocessor are you using. It's because you use the dollar character. And then you have Less. Less is quite similar. Less respect more CSS. They wanted to be more close to CSS to avoid this, migration and this confusion and this adoption to the preprocessor. Variables normally use the @ symbol, the one that you use for the emails. And finally, SAS use also the dollar symbol. And as I say, SAS has the two ways, has the SCSS or the SAS version. The SAS version is quite similar to stylus. And as I say, both have similar features. All of them have similar features. Some of them have more, some of them have less. Currently, even I say the SAS is the most popular, there are a few frameworks like Undesign for React, that still use Less instead of SAS. But Bootstrap now, the last version of Bootstrap since 3 or 4, they are using SAS as the main preprocessor. So now let's talk about the features. Let's talk what are these special features. So variables. So what made difference, and this is why variables and preprocessors are no a good idea anymore, is because the process with the preprocessor is they replace, and I maybe forget about that, what is called preprocessor. It's because it's a process that you do before you have your CSS, right? Like you have this special code that is called CSS preprocessor syntax, and then you need to compile this or transform this in a CSS file. So the problem with this is that the variables are replaced in that process, and they are hard code, and you can't modify them anymore. But instead, CSS custom properties that are the new CSS variables are evaluated by the browser in runtime. That means that you can change the variables anytime, any point in the code. And this is super awesome because you can even, override them between media queries, override them between, using JavaScript, and you can do a lot of stuff, and it's amazing. I mean, imagine you have some mobile responsive website, and when you want to do a desktop, apply a desktop breakpoint, you can change the font size, you can change the colors, you can change a lot of stuff. Anything that can be, say as a variable, as a property, can use custom properties, and that's pretty awesome. I have a couple of examples here. I don't want to show you because I'm pretty sure we will share the slides, and you can take a look how powerful is this, how nice is to, for example, do theming with custom properties. Because with even using preprocessors, you have to do a lot of different variables and a lot of different combinations with different selectors in order to achieve that. So that's one of the things, one of the reasons to stop use variable in preprocessors, because custom properties are definitely better. And right now, the usage of custom properties is basically 94% global uses against, the current uses of all of the browsers. So it's well, is well supported for most of the current browsers. Of course, IE11, but IE11 is like super deprecated. We know that some of us need to use it because legacy, projects or whatever. But IE11 is in the past. We should just move on. And then nesting. And this is a controversial one because I remember when I heard about nesting, this magnificent feature with the preprocessors, you think, oh, this is powerful and this is really nice. And then you ended with something like this. And this is crazy. This is super hard to read. In fact, there are a lot of articles, a lot of articles about teaching you how to properly use the nesting, because they gave us a powerful tool and we just overuse it. And this is crazy. You can read this. It's super hard to maintain. It's super hard to debug. It's definitely not a really good idea from the maintainability perspective. So normally the recommendation is don't go 3 levels deep. My personal recommendation about nesting is don't go 2 levels deep, because that's enough. Even this is similar if you have been using the structuring, you will know that you can destructure so many levels as you want. But there is a point where if you do that, the code is really hard to read. Yeah, that's the point. It's like you don't need to really see it. You can see how the mess is the code there with the whole destructuring. That was intentional. So the good news is one of the things that these nesting features have there is we have this parent selector, the ampersand one. And then D refers to the initial selector, the parent one. The good news, there is a proposal in CSS for that, and this is in stage 1. CSS, as Afonso mentions, it has different proposal, different stage, when it's similar how JavaScript works, there is a draft, then they approve it, and then it passes to a release candidate, etc., etc. So there is a good news. This is a proposal that is in work, and it's like the parent selector, and you can use it right now with a little trick that I will teach you later. And then there is also a new selector. This one has so many times. It was called match, then any, and finally it's called is. It's the dot point is. And it's similar. It's exactly do the same as the CSS processors works today. Let's say you want to, normally you will have to choose section H1, section H2, colon, section H3, etc., etc. So with the new selector, the E selector, you can just grab that, and you don't need to repeat too much code. And this is also as a proposal, and we will see what is the support of browser of that. But this is now here, and it can be used again with a little trick that will teach you later. And yeah, it's, as I said before, normally when you write a preprocessor, when you, for instance, write div, p, ul, and then you want to put a string inside, the result of the processor, the result that the preprocessor will transfer this code into a CSS file is exactly the same as it will have the same effect as the is selector, but this time it's going to be native. It's going to be native, and the browser will handle it in a more performant way. So currently the usage is the current support for the browser is not as big as custom variables, but there is a work in progress. As you will see, Firefox now support it, but then the other browser had a couple of flags, and of course, since this specification changed a lot, they need to fix this version and remove the flags. But is there. It's going to be used, soon. And then we had the mixins. And the mixins are quite tricky because it's kind of, it's like a function, but it's not a function. It's like you have this CSS piece of code that you want to reuse in so many places. So it's kind of like, okay, it's like kind of a little, like a small code block, like a small module that I want to reuse. And for instance, we have this example for the transfer mixin. When you pass a prop, and then you can include it, and he will add the prefixes necessary for your CSS. And a spoiler alert, this is not the correct way to do this anymore. We have a lot of great tools that do prefixing for us and don't require to write this code, and it's based on the browser support. So we'll say later. And there was a proposal. There was a proposal that was called the apply, rule in CSS, and it did it the same. They basically wanted to combine the custom properties in order to apply mixins. But I have a link here when the author of this proposal, and this was like a external proposal, abandoned the proposal because it wasn't a good idea. He realized that it introduced more issues than the solution that they want to solve. So unfortunately, yes, Chrome started to, even it was a external proposal, Chrome has like support with a flag, but now it's like no one is going to, to use it, and it's not going to be implemented. But if you think about it, a lot of problems that we use to solve with mixins had a better native solution. For instance, this is a mixin, and this is from the SAS Lang page, the official docs. It's a mixin for solve the problem when you want to develop a website that can be read from right to left or from left to right. So this was a really good idea. Like, okay, now you have a mixin. Now if you want to include, this property in a sidebar, you just define the mixin, you pass some couple of, parameters, and now you have it. But as I say, a lot of the mixins that we use, like for instance, colors, I used to do a lot of mixins with colors. Now CSS is implementing solutions, or there are another tools that implement it in a better way, right? As Afonso said, we have this mixing color, we have this contrast color. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be native. So probably we don't really need mixins anymore. For instance, this is a tweet for Sarah Sweden, and she explains how we don't need any mixing at all. And using logical properties, there is another new feature in CSS. We don't need to do like override a lot of styles. We just need to define, the code in the beginning is the code that you normally had to define to override stuff. But then the line behind is the new solution for this problem. So mixins maybe was a solution for a problem that has a better solution. And to be honest, is what I think right now. Like, we should think about what are those native solutions, or what is this other way to solve mixins. Then functions. Functions are a tricky one because with functions, of course, you can't define everything. And basically, the purpose of a function is execute code, and it will give you a result, right? So for that, I have this question. Do you know about functions in CSS? Do you know that we have a lot of functions? And yes, every time that you see like a keyword with a parenthesis, that's a function. And you are like passing arguments. And I'm pretty sure that you don't know that there is 93 CSS native functions there. 18 of them are in process of being released. It's like these new, functions that maybe need some kind of support with Polyfills or other tools. And 14 of them are deprecated. That's good to know. So maybe, yes, call is a function. Maybe we should start paying more attention at what are those functions and what the purpose of them. And maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And there is a link in this every feature that I mentioned, everything that I show with the code, I have a link right at the bottom. There is a good article for CSS tricks that explains step by step how can use these functions, and they have a group. They have a group by common, by color functions, by grade function, etc., etc. So we really need to understand more CSS. For instance, we know that, custom properties are awesome. We can, use as a variables, but custom properties, for instance, has something called fallback values. And that means that even you can define the value of the custom properties, you can have a default value if this custom property doesn't exist. And it doesn't need to be one. You can add comma, and then the other one, and add the other one, and add the other one, and it works. And you can reuse it, and you can, kind of put a variable inside a variable. And I'm pretty sure that you can do a lot of stuff with this, and maybe the functions are not necessary at all. Finally, the models. And this is also a tricky one, because some of the definitions modules for me doesn't make sense. For instance, if you look for modules in Sass, now is just the ability to include CSS inside CSS. And they used to call this add import, but since there was so much confusion about the native CSS import, they changed it to the keyword use. And for me, and there is a note. When you use the native, add import in CSS, that's not a really good idea. A lot of people tell you avoid that, because that create extra HTTP requests. And remember, if you want to load a good application that have a good performance, you need to avoid as many HTTP requests as possible. It's not for all the case. Maybe you want to do something asynchronous, and there is another solutions for that. We are not going to talk about that specific case. But overuse the import, it could be a bad thing. The native add import. But then the solution that the Sass is giving us for us, for me, doesn't feel really like modules. Doesn't feel like these code modules that we want. Doesn't feel like the CSS modules that we know. It's more like concatenate files. The ability to have small files and then put it together as a whole file because I want just one request for the CSS. And to be honest, again, this feels like it's more a task for our bundlers. And if we are doing modern front-end projects, we definitely are using a bundle. And for that, in Webpack, we have the mini CSS extract plugin. And if you are using components or another, single page app framework, they will do the job for you. They will take all the import reference of CSS and it will extract it and will apply the minification to the CSS file. Or even if maybe you are not using Webpack or you are using something a little bit older like Gulp, it's the same. There is this plugin called Good Concat CSS. So definitely it's not needed. So my point is as you see, we have a lot of features that right now we have native implementations that solve these issues for us. And you need to think about it, because normally we just bring a whole library just for use one thing. And this is really wrong, because we are having a lot of features out of the box, and then we need to remove them, or we need to fight with them, or maybe people just misuse these features. So it's something that we need to think about. How can we do it in the other way? There is another good about CSS modules, and the really CSS modules that are used for scope, not for import. And both things, CSS modules for scoping and CSS import, again, are supported for the modern bundles. For instance, Browserify, Parser, Rollup, or Webpack, all of them support the module, scoping. And for the source, I don't remember which one here, but we have a qualification of 3.5/4. I don't know which one doesn't support a few things, but we have options, and that's important. And for me, I feel this concatenation of the CSS file, the minification, is most like a bundler problem. It's not a preprocessor problem, right? So it is worthy. It is really worthy, use Sass. Of course, it's not all just what I'm saying. It's not like, oh, Guillermo says don't use it. That's it. Of course, it's not like that. But we should take a look at some trends, right? This is like a survey. It's called the State of CSS. It's very famous because another survey called the State of JavaScript. And we can't forget about less and stylus. If you see in the right, in the satisfaction level, and I have the link there, you can hit the whole details and the whole explanation there and how many people answer this. Less and stylus has a satisfaction that less than the 50%. But then SAS and PostCSS that we are talking about later about it has a satisfaction of 90% for SAS and 91% for PostCSS. And then they have similar interests, and the only thing is the awareness. Like basically everyone knows about SAS, but then for PostCSS, just the 80% know it. But for me, that's like a lot. And also, if we see there is another survey. This is for 2019, and as you see, the difference between the 2019 survey and the 2018 survey says like the number of ushas for the PostCSS increment at least 20%, while SAS just increment 11%. And that means something, right? That means something. That means that something is changing, right? And also we have this other like query for the downloads from the npm. And as you see, this little guy here, this guy, I think is orange. Yes, this big thing that we said, this is PostCSS, right? And I don't know if you know about PostCSS, but we're going to explain it later. It's kind of controversial because it's called post-processor. So then you will say, okay, the key is not use preprocessor, the key is use post-processor. But I think it's quite different. It's quite different and has some advantages that I want to explain you. And yeah, the trend is similar for the other preprocessors. And the message is this, like, if we don't start to use the new CSS today, it will happen like happened with HTML5, ECMAScript 2015, and Flexbox. For me, I am really amazed how I can talk with so many developers and then don't use Flexbox as primary tool for create layouts. That's incredible. I use Flexbox. I mean, I can't live without Flexbox. My Flexbox is the default thing that I use because it's so easy to use. It's just a great idea, and that is great CSS. And for me, it's like I am really amazed how people don't use Flexbox, and I can imagine. I remember in that time with the HTML5 how people refused to use it. We need to really encourage ourselves to start using these things, to research about it, to think, should I use the whole set of stuff just to solve one little problem? Because this is what my concern. Like we are just bringing a lot of the stuff with maybe we don't need it, and this is when PostCSS make a difference. So my message is always beat on a standard solution, because it's the reality. Standards is just going to beat other tools that are there. And I remember that Joan mentioned in the chat that this kind of stuff needs to happen, like preprocessor needed to happen in order to, the different companies and these different groups decide, oh, we need to definitely, rush and implement this stuff. This is normal. It doesn't want a mistake. But if you remember my first slide, and I want to, come back there, the latest release of these preprocessors for stylus were 2019, for less was 2017, and for SAS was 2016. This is the latest release that you can see in GitHub. Of course, they do patch and they stop, but what we can call big releases has been a while that they don't develop like new features. And it's because CSS now is developing the new features. And it's the CSS, the native CSS is the future. So always be on a standard solution. And then we have PostCSS. And what I like about PostCSS is because with PostCSS, I don't have a lot of big bundle of features that maybe I don't going to use. With PostCSS, I can decide which features I want to use. And it works on top of JavaScript. And one of the first things that I use, and another thing that I really like about PostCSS, here relies on kind of the standard things. Like for instance, we have this auto prefixer, and the nice thing about the auto prefixer with PostCSS is like you can use it in conjunction with browser list. Browser list is like another kind of standard that Babel, Webpack, and other so many frameworks and tools use to decide how they behave based on a query that you define. Let's say I want to use the last version of every browser, as I say, and I want to use at least the 1% of the browsers that everyone is using. And I want to support a E11 or a E9, whatever. Browser list define like this kind of standard file, and it can be used in the package JSON, it can be used like config file, whatever. And auto prefixer will read that. And that's pretty nice. And then we have PostCSS preset M. This used to be called, if I'm not wrong, CSS Next something. It was a plugin for PostCSS. And that means this is equivalent of what we know in JavaScript like Babel. And that's pretty awesome because we don't need to wait until this stuff is just released in the browser. PostCSS preset M allows us to use the new things like the ease that we saw before that just has like 2-3% support for the browsers. We can use it right now. We can use the nesting selectors. We can use a lot of stuff, and it's pretty awesome. So there is no any excuse. Don't use the new things that are coming today because we can start using new proposals for the stage 0, and also we can change this based on the browser, based on the stage. If maybe you don't feel, comfortable to use the stage 0 because maybe so it's a draft, it's too green, you can just move it to a stage 1, 2, or 3, whatever. And finally, we have CSS modules. And if you are using frameworks like, React or maybe Vue, and you have used Webpack, and you have enabled with the CSS loader the modules true option, you have been using CSS modules for a while. And CSS modules is just, something that allow you to start like put a lot of prefixing on your stuff. You can like even reuse the same class because it's a scope in a module. And this will generate classes that are unique, and your classes are not going to, be override. For instance, a way to use it in React, and this is not just like, it can be used with React. It maybe is one of the most common examples because when you start to develop components or any other framework that develop components, you start to realize that your problem is not like a split CSS in big files. You want now have your CSS a scope per module because those still, belongs to your component. And in a similar approach that are using the web components today. So CSS modules, this is with using through PostCSS, allow you use real CSS modules, not this concatenation that for me that doesn't make sense. This is like real module scoping solution, and you can use it right away. So my message is like, you really need to consider why you're using preprocessors, because maybe you are using for the variables, and as I showed you before, it's not really worthy. You can do more with custom properties. Maybe you're using for nesting, or maybe you have like a couple of mixing or a couple of stuff that maybe is there. But we should think about other solutions like maybe PostCSS that doesn't like, encourage to like learn things that maybe are going to be deprecated later because preprocessors, as you see, they are not doing anything new recently. Because now with all these new specs with CSS Houdini, we are going to be able to have too much feature in CSS. And if you don't learn those new things and you don't use it, it's going to take more time. It's like a work for us as a developer to start to try these new things, report bugs, and start using the new CSS because it's available for you today with a lot of helpers like PostCSS and a lot of presets. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Guille. It was a very
welcome.
interesting and controversial talk. We have some questions here. Joan, it's asking that please ask this question. Let me show you on the screen. There is for you, Guille. What do you think about use PodCSS plus PodCSS prevent env as a preprocessor? With then you can use the new CSS properties that are to come, but you will always be writing a standard CSS.
Yeah, and John just say that I answered his question, and yes, I agree. Like for me, it's like the big problem with the current preprocessor, as I say, is you have a lot of stuff that maybe you are not using. Is when we used to use Bootstrap because the great system, and then Bootstrap has a lot of stuff that we don't really need. So that's it. If you can use a tool that become configurable, that like a Lego piece that you can plug stuff instead of just a bundle of stuff, that's going to be always a good tool. And mostly since PostCSS percent n relies in the standards, that's definitely a real and a good way to start using like these helpers and tools and libraries.
Perfect, thank you. There is another comment. And nothing rich say, I personally think that CSS now is more about how do you feel comfortable grading your CSS. And I agree with him.
Yeah,
But
I
yes,
agree too.
yes, right. I have a question for you. While the rest of the people, please leave your question here. And it is I wrote here. What would you think? I mean, for you, what would be the most difficult to adapt if you come from working with preprocessors? What would be the most difficult thing to adapt?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Okay, what would you, what would you think that could be the most difficult for people that come from
Oh,
working with preprocessors now with work with standard CSS, the new features that you explained today?
I really can't imagine what would like, because that's the bad thing around preprocessors, that maybe you start in a new company, you start using SAS, and you think it's CSS. It's like when we used to do jQuery. Like I
Yeah.
remember that I start like that, and I thought I was using JavaScript, but it wasn't JavaScript, it was jQuery. And then I guess maybe the nesting, because I know that the nesting needs to be used in a proper way, and people think he can nest like just like that. Maybe that will be like the most difficult part.
Okay, so you think that in the future, and CSS preprocessor will be like a jQuery for library.
Yeah, they are
Yes.
now like jQuery.
Okay. Thank you. Next question here. Um, this one. According to your experience, how long is learning curve about CSS if I already use SAS?
No, it's pretty small. As you see, it's just like a plug and play. If you are familiar with bundles like Webpack, you can integrate PostCSS in Webpack. And the good thing is they have a really good documentation. And then it's just a matter to decide. For instance, you want to add, to support autoprefixer, you just put the option, I want autoprefixer. That's it. And you don't need to create a mixin for autoprefix. That's the nice thing. I want to support features based on the browser. You put your browser list file. And this is just plug and play. There is no any difference. As I say, most of the features that require like new learning are like coming for CSS. The variables now, the custom properties can be used right now. Then the nesting is an spec that is working. So if you implement this preset, you can start using the nesting, and it's pretty similar as the preprocessor used to do it. So the learning curve is really, really small.
Okay. And okay, so nice comments. Thank you. Thank you, Guille. And thank you, everyone, for being here. So now let's continue with our agenda, okay? Let me share again my screen. Okay, it's the this is my favorite part now. So let's first bring our rest of the team. Hello again. Guille, the screen is yours. Please let us know our big announcement.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I don't really know how long we have been in the community? Maybe Luisa can remind me. It has been 2 years, 3 years since we
Uh,
started.
3 years, I think.
Yeah, it has been 3 years and has been an amazing journey. And since I moved to Sweden 1 year ago, I mean, I have a so amazing organizers in Medellin, and I haven't to worry a lot about this community because they have it handled so well. But still, I feel a little disconnected because it's like it's my community, but now I'm in a new country, a new time zone. It's quite hard, to handle, and that's why I create Stockholm CSS, and that's not a big announcement, no. And we are planning on our next meetup, pretty soon. But then I was thinking about how can we really how can I feel part of this community again? How can we do something connects everything? And the big announcement is we decide to be global, and we decide that now this is not going to be like Medellin CSS. This is going to be something new called CSS Community Dev, and we are really really excited about this because this is going to open the opportunity to bring more people to do stuff like we're doing today. This is like such a coincidence, like we start like deciding to do this meetup in English because Afonso spoke with us like, hey, I want to participate, I don't know Spanish, what we can do, I just know English, I can try. And this is really awesome, because we can think about other cities. And in fact, I think we mentioned this before. And we talk about Bogota CSS, and this is something that is going to happen. Bogota is a city in Colombia as well. But then we will have also Stockholm CSS as part of this global community. And the invitation is like, if maybe you are thinking about open a CSS community in your country, please start with us. We are going to start, rolling up this new brand. It's like this new umbrella brand because since it's going to be umbrella brand definitely, but we are here to help you, to develop your new community, the new CSS community. And of course, we have experience with Medellin. I am going to start experiment here with Stockholm. Oscar Barajas is going to help us with Bogota CSS. We're willing to hear about you. You want to start, your community, adopting this umbrella band. We are going to help you. We have the resources, the experience, and we are so happy about this. And yeah, that's the big announcement.
Yes, and we are super excited for that. Really, really excited. That is what all of us we are here, and this is the presentation of the new logo, of the new concept. It's community dev and not nothing. Thank you very much for the word there. It's amazing, and I know that it's going to be many other cities involved in this new community. So thank you, thank you. Now let's continue, team. I don't know if the team want to say something else.
No, as I did just say, if you want to open a new community of CSS, please contact us, and we are going to help you to create, and we are going to give you a guide to do the community in the best way, and that's it. I don't know. I don't have anything to say.
Okay, thank you, Luisa. Okay, so Henry, you want to say something?
No, 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 no.
Okay, perfect. So let me share again my screen. I appreciate your comments, Nathan. All of them are welcome. So now let's continue with our agenda. So the other invitation is to be a speaker, right?
Yeah, if you want to be a speaker in our community, or if you want to share your knowledge about any topic related to CSS, design, UI, UX, or something like that, don't hesitate in sending your proposal to this form that you can see in the screen. And if you need help to prepare or organize your talk or slides, we will very happy to help you with whatever thing that you need for us.
Exactly. Now we're open to for talks in English or in Spanish. Actually, the next meeting is going to be completely in Spanish. We have a person who is going to share her experience, and it's actually something for beginners. So it's very nice. I hope to see you in the next meetup. Don't forget to follow us. And this is our accounts. So yes, please write us if you have some questions, some suggestions for us. And let me bring Afonso again here just to say thank you again to you too for your great speech, for your talk. See you in the next time. I don't know if you want to share something with the rest of the community.
Gracias.
Okay.
Obrigado, Afonso.
Oh,
Okay. So see you next time, and thank you very much for attending this.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
See
bye.
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.